Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Fall Art and Ideas lecture series. Tonight, our event is hybrid, which means that we are hosting people here physically in the gallery. It's so nice to see you. And we're also hosting it virtually online. So this evening's talk will run roughly 45 minutes, and we'll have some time at the end for questions, both online as well as in person. For those of you online, I invite you to please submit questions through the Q&A function, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. When you're ready, you can click the icon, the window is going to pop up, and you can type your question directly to me. For those of you that are here in person, please just signal us at the end of the talk and we'll come over with a microphone so that you can ask your questions. Also, I'll ask if you have a cell phone on you and you're here with us, please turn them to silent at this time.
Oh, good point.
I guess mine as well, yes. If you need any bathrooms, they're located in the basement of our building. You can take the elevator or stairs there, and there are also 3 fire exits out of this room if we were to hear an alarm. Directly behind you, down the stairwell, down the heritage stair, and also the south staircase. So my name is Sonia Blazik. I'm the curator at the Judith and Norman Alix Art Gallery, and I'll be taking care of the tech portion this evening. So if you need some support, send me a chat. I've already sorted a few tech things, so I'm feeling pretty good about myself. So Art and Ideas is a series of presentations which complement our current exhibitions by drawing connections to themes that are found in the exhibits, and they feature discussions with artists and experts. This evening, we have the opportunity to hear from artist Tracey-Mae Chambers. Tracey-Mae is a Métis artist and member of the Métis Nation of Ontario. She is a sculptor that uses beeswax as her medium of choice, and she is also an installation artist. She has attended residencies and exhibitions extensively across Canada and the United States. She has been commissioned to create sculptures for the United Nations Commission for use as their partnership award for the United Nations Environmental Award. And her work is in numerous private collections, including CBS's TV series, Star Trek Discovery. And as much as I want to dive into every nook and cranny of your artistic practice, tonight we will be focusing on Tracey-Mae's installation work and specifically Hope and Healing Canada. Tracey-Mae was at the Judith and Norman Alix Art Gallery in August on the 4th and 5th to install Hope and Healing Canada at our location, and you can see it behind me, just a sliver of it. She meticulously installed a series of site-specific works, all from red yarns, and energized nearly every single window of the gallery. Tracey, you've been such a pleasure to work with. Thank you so much for allowing us to bring you to Sarnia. It's been a delight to be able to connect with you, and most of all, thanks for carving out some time as you're joining us all the way from Manitoba today. So thank you, Zoom, for making that possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know you're very busy as you continue all of your installations, and I want to note that they're not only in Canada, but they do go into the United States as well. So I'll hand it off to you. I'm really looking forward to this. So thank you for coming back.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me. And I appreciate the being able to use the space and that you allowed me to use almost every window. The only disappointing thing that happened when I was there is that you wouldn't let me use every window. That really made me angry. But no, I didn't. But I looked at them longingly.
When can you come back?
I would. I have new work. I would come. Yes, big giant weaving. So yes, it was a wonderful space to work in, and everyone was so helpful, obviously. So and considering I made one of your your installation tech person get another dog. I didn't realize how
responsible for
I
that,
am.
yes.
I am a powerful woman. Apparently, I can guilt people into getting second dogs. That was hilarious. Anyways, so
Dale's
let's
in the
go.
chat room laughing. He's sending laughing faces.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Geez, who knew? Yes, so, and I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I appreciate it immensely. This is it's a hard topic, but it's a worthwhile topic to pursue. It's a hard conversation to start. It's a harder conversation to keep going, to maintain. You know, everyone has a lot of stuff going on, so it's you know, there's things we want to talk about and things we don't want to talk about, right? That's the same in every family, the same in every community. So tonight we're going to talk about Hope and Healing Canada. So I think I have control of the slides, right? Yes? Yeah. I do. Okay, so in May and June of last year, I was finally able to see my boys again, and I realized how difficult it was to not be around them. And I had a really hard time sort of working through that, but also realizing that everyone else that was going through the same thing, that it wasn't just me. We were all sort of fumbling around trying to figure out what to do next. So I wasn't sure where I was headed in my own practice. I wasn't sure what to do next after COVID. But then the first children, 215 kidnapped children were, I don't like to use the word discovered, because that sort of presumes that no one knew where they were there, but they did. So the discovery, we'll use that word since that seems to be what people are saying, of these unmarked graves sort of sent me in a different direction. And the feelings that I've listed here, I'm sure are feelings that you also were feeling at that time. And not just as a result of this, but as a result of COVID and other things that were happening in the United States, with Black Lives Matter, and all these things were happening at the same time. So this is how I decided to move through this and sort of figure out how to deal with it on my own, in my own head. And so these installations, I'm trying to address connection and lack of connection when we look at how settler communities interact with Indigenous communities. And I wanted to look also at how Western culture addresses any Indigenous community. If you look at India, if you look anywhere in Africa, and any place that's been colonized, and how either Western ideas or European ideas are imposed upon an Indigenous worldview, and how that adjusts and changes those Indigenous priorities. So I don't know what decolonization looks like in the greater world. I only know what it looks like in my own life. And I actually started in my own house, actually, which I'll show you in a little bit. But so I was trying to look at those connections and the power dynamics and white privilege and all these kinds of things, while looking at the history of colonialization in Ontario Island, and Canada specifically at that time. I'm often asked about why red. Red is not my favorite color. People always say that to me, that I must really like red. I don't actually. Yellow is my favorite color, but it's certainly not the right color for this project. To me, red is power. It is anger. It is a threatening color, but it's also a racial slur. And I think we often associate it with blood and death and things like that. So, and I wanted to use a powerful color, and it was the only color. Once I, made a pros and cons list, this was the color that I had to use. So I started my own space. So the space on the left is my apartment I took everything out of the apartment and then only put back the things that were important to me. So, which were, of course, the pictures of my sons, some of the gifts that they have given me through like our lives together, and the things that I needed, like chairs and a coffee table and couch, and all the other accoutrement I just took out, and then sort of questioned why I had all that stuff, like how many pillows do I actually need, and then identified that as being a part of colonial worldview, which is capitalism. The scene on the left is actually in our apartment building. The other thing to remember is that when I'm creating these, this is like June, and we aren't allowed to go anywhere else. So I can't create anywhere but in my own spaces. And our parking garage was empty. So hence, people must have really wondered when they drove by, though, what the hell this was. But anyways, this building was filled with BMWs and I don't know, all sorts of fancy cars, driven by students, which I thought was such a weird dynamic. But and again, a part of capitalism. So this is one of the first couple of galleries that I created at. The one on the left is the Grimsby Public Art Gallery, and the one on the right is the Carnegie Gallery in Dundas. Galleries tend to be places that are intimidating to most of us. I can't tell you that I'd walk into the AGO and feel, welcomed. I love that gallery, and my son Parker and I specifically have been to a lot of galleries, and I never walk in feeling comfortable. And I'm sure that's a lot of people. It's intimidating to a lot of people. And I think that's one of the first steps for places like galleries is to be less intimidating. That sounds so strange, but be less intimidating. And when you start using or speaking the voices and telling stories of other people within the community instead of just one story, that will come, that starts to come. It's a byproduct of that process of decolonization. So these are the first two. The left one, again, is, like I said, one of the first ones that I did. And it's hard to tell in this photograph, but it is actually a tornado, but quite large at the top, and then goes down into these three pieces of wood that actually some children left there, so I just used them. But that's what I felt like I was, like this little tornado going into spaces like this and then stirring it up, literally, figuratively, literally, and just disrupting that space, which is really, I think, what I do. Is a small thing, but it's a small disruption in the space to say, yeah, I was here. I mean, I don't fit the mold of who's supposed to be here, but I was here. This is blah, 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 blah. My gosh, it's going to be that kind of day. Anyways, this is Riverbank Gallery in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Queenston, Ontario. And I didn't know this, but just up from this land, First Nations warriors and Métis fighters fought alongside the British against the Americans. And that made me sort of pause, because I didn't know that before. I just had assumed it had been British soldiers exclusively. And it was really, I felt honored that the Métis were a part of that. And it just is it's another level that we don't know as Canadians. Settlers don't know. I'm Métis, I don't know. It's that kind of information is not included in Canadian history taught at schools. It's generally speaking not available in museums either. So again, it just highlights the point that not everyone's story is told at places like museums and art galleries and public places. I get a lot of sort of comments about the aesthetic. So the one on the right is a flower that I made. I like the connection between the earth and the sky. And in between is this new growth of these trees. It's spring at the Tom Thompson Gallery. And so people always comment, oh, it's so pretty. And not seeing it as a political thing. So I'm sort of glad that I can make something pretty and still be political about it. So it's not confrontational when it's a flower that has roots to the ground and ties up to the new branches and the new growth up to the sky. The one on the left is actually a 25-foot knit braid that I made while I was sitting in front of Parliament Hill. That was as close as they let me come And the guards had like these, I don't know what kind of gun they are, but some sort of gun on them. But they brought me coffee and stuff. So they were so nice. So they said anytime I wanted to come and protest, I was welcome. So, you know, that was kind of nice. It was very weird. It was surreal that they brought me drinks and stuff. So not fun drinks, just coffee drinks. Yeah, so political and pretty makes me happy. Okay, so this was a tough space to work in, not just emotionally tough, but actually physically tough. There was no heat in this building, and this is December that I'm there, and this is in Sault Ste. Marie, which is where my family moved to once they left Drummond Island. And this residential school, this is a Presbyterian church at Shingwalk, which is at the Algoma University site. And if you look, the wood, I'm very sorry that I don't know the actual names of these things within churches. I'm an atheist, so it's just something that I just don't know. And if you, all of the woodwork is actually created by the boys and young men who were at that residential school. So they're building and learning how to do this sort of skill, which isn't a skill for them because there's no woodworking shops on the reservation and nobody off the reservation is going to hire them. So I'm not really sure what the woodworking thing was except for slave labor. So everything that's wood in here was made by the children that were in this residential school. On the right-hand side, you can see a red folder on the stairs. That is filled with the names of the children who are in the graveyard that's adjacent to the church. I want to point out that none of those graves are marked, not one. But if you go to the other side of the church, the graves of the other people are marked. So it's just, you know, it's so many levels of disrespect and disregard. It's hard to just fathom how people can be as cruel as they can to one another. You'll notice that the Bibles are open at the top of the stairway. And as it goes out, all the little people Bibles are turned over. And that actually follows straight through out of the church and out the front steps, right out of the church. And I wanted it to sort of, in my mind, to signify the fact that the children, yes, were indoctrinated with this information, but that I hoped when they left this space that they turned that page, turned that book over and let go of that stuff, let go of the pain that, you know, or the things they learned and, you know, the self-loathing and all these things that came out of this school. Anyways, that's, you know, that's not what happened, but that's how I wanted to look at this space. In an ideal world, that would be how it would be. So everyone has heard about Ryerson University in Toronto, and Egerton Ryerson, he did contribute to the designing of the public school system in Canada, or not in Canada. But he also designed residential schools, physically how residential schools would look. So this is one of the templates. This building, this is at Black Creek Pioneer Village in Toronto. And so in this one, as I was starting, I wasn't sure what I was going to build. So I started at the back, and as I moved forward, I sort of lost because I realized how little the seats were. That sounds simple, right? The further I moved forward, I realized these little tiny people are in these little tiny chairs in this residential school. These are not teenagers. These are not, you know, 12, 13, these are little people. And that really was one of the first times that truly struck home to me. And it sounds so simple, this little chair, but the little chair sent me into into sobbing. So what I did was build a longhouse. I built a longhouse using the stovepipe as the top of the longhouse. So I was bringing the children back into the longhouse. And not like all First Nations communities or longhouse communities. That's not what I'm implying, but just that's what I was able to build over these children was this longhouse. So this was a tough place to work at. At the front of the room, you can see that I've suspended the chair by holding it up with crochet, just crochet lines over and over again, which is the tangle of colonization and the superiority, that it implies. And so that's what this on the left-hand side is the teacher's desk. This is the Mohawk Institute, which is in Brantford. I built with help, actually, of a young man from Six Nations who's he was 12 going on 13. So he helped me build all the lines going up into the tree. So he got up into the tree and I would throw on the wool and he throw it back down. And the whole time he explained to me how to gut a rabbit, which was horrible because I'm a vegetarian. So it was traumatic, not for him, for me. And that was not fun, but he was so proud of that knowledge. And and the way he conveyed it to me was so respectful. It was wonderful. He was an absolute delight. It was such a good day. So he and I spent the day together. He helped me with this. So the new branches, again, this is sort of a springtime photo, new branches that I've made going up into the tree and roots going down into the base with the residential school, the Mohawk Institute in the background. When I came back to take down this installation, they were doing the ground X-ray, rolling that machine across the ground, and it was really disturbing. My husband was there, and he had our dogs with us, and I said, you must not go in that direction. You have to take the dogs in the other direction. Don't go anywhere near where they are, because that's what they're doing, and it's such a traumatic thing to have to do. So, and the members, residential school survivors were rolling that machine, and it was just traumatic watching that as I'm taking this down. I just put something up addressing decolonization with a young man, a young First Nations man. And when I come back to take it down, an elderly man is doing the radar thing on X-ray on the ground. It was a traumatic sort of experience. Those two, the dichotomy of that too was certainly evident. This is at Craft Ontario in Toronto. Oftentimes Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis crafts are part of this niche market, especially, well, I shouldn't say especially, but predominantly in my mind, it's Inuit sculpture. We see them all over the place, right? And people buy them for massive amount of money, and the artist traditionally has made pittance. And it's just another layer of colonization where something is stolen essentially from whichever nation it is and used for profit by someone who's not a part of that community. Now, and that supposedly is getting better, but I've recently seen an instance where it isn't. So, which is disheartening, because I thought that things were moving forward, and sometimes you realize that it's 6 steps forward and 18 steps back. So it was good to create in that kind of a space, just to disrupt that kind of that part of colonization that still goes on. I get asked a lot whether or not I throw the wool out, and I don't. I know that's hard to believe, but I don't. Capitalism is part of a Western or a European civilization. It is not part of a First Nations worldview. And so I do not throw the wool out. I roll it back up again. But it's worth it, because even the pieces that I make, the larger pieces that you'll see, I reuse those, I recreate them into something else. And the stories that are in each one of those places go with the work as it travels across Canada, and it gets bigger, and the pieces get bigger, or they change, but they're still the same piece. And I like that continuity across the country, well, across Turtle Island. So it's important to me to reuse the yarn. Yes, there comes a point where I have to throw some of it out, but most times I'm able to keep it all. I'd like that I like being able to intervene into spaces that traditionally I would not have been able to show in. The left-hand photograph is in Quebec City. That's 1/2 of the installation. It's 32 feet long times 14 feet wide times 2, between 2 buildings built in 1683, or 4 buildings, my bad, and around the corner from a Catholic church. So, you know, I like that sort of disruption into that space to say, you know, we are here, we were here, we're still here. And the one on the right-hand side is actually at, oh my goodness, at St. Laurent College at the Brockville campus. And again, that is not a space that would generally speaking have Indigenous artwork in the gallery. It is awesome to see museums and galleries embracing this notion of decolonization, and also recognizing that decolonization is not the job of the Indigenous people, Métis people, Inuit people. It's not the job it's not their job to decolonize spaces like this. It is the job of the spaces, whether that space is a museum or an art gallery or a library or a, you know, city hall or the government of Canada or the legal system. It's all the job of the colonizer. It is the job of the settlers within Canada, myself included, to decolonize and break down those systems that have been in place for centuries and start it over again, so that we're telling everybody's story and including everyone in a respectful manner, which up until now has not happened. But so many museums and art galleries are more than willing to do that, happy to do that, want to tell everyone's stories, want to be respectful. So the one at the Chilliwack Museum is the one on the right, and the one on the left has gone out of my mind. Oh, it's the Stouffville Museum. Sorry. There's been 112 installations. Sometimes I lose track. So forgive me. I need a manager. Okay, whoops, my bad. Sorry, guys. Oh, jinkies, Daphne. I got to go back. Sorry, guys. Oh, now what I do? 1, 2, 3. Okay, sorry. This is something that I learned when I was at, oh my gosh. Macintosh Gallery is at what university? London. Yeah. So I learned there that they have a course about repatriation of artifacts, and that has started to happen. When I was at working at the Museum of Vancouver, they are actually repatriating. I'm having a day. Sorry, guys. Totem poles. They're repatriating because they were stolen, right? They just go in, take them, you know. So it was a wonderful. It's a wonderful thing to learn. Also, I wanted to point out in this photograph, the flower that's there is actually the flower that was at the Shingwalk Residential School, hung from the stained glass window, and was here at the Macintosh Gallery, and then now is hung in Quebec City. So it's in between those 2 buildings. So that's what I mean by the continuity of the work. The flower is a lot bigger now, but it's the same flower. And so the stories that are within it that have happened at each one of these places across Canada stay with that piece as far as I'm concerned. And when I write about that, that's what I'm thinking about. So I've ended up making, those really do look like blood vessels, don't they? Sorry, I get sidetracked really easily. This is at the Cambridge Art Gallery, and I started to think about my family. This is why I started making these weavings. I was thinking about the fact that my 2 sons were sort of not getting along, and I was thinking about the fact that no matter what, we're sort of woven together. Like I can't talk to one without mentioning the other one, right? And so I started making these little weavings, and that's what I was thinking about, is that so our family is this little weaving, And then these lines that stretch out are the lines of, okay, so my sister and her family, that's one of those lines. And they stretch out, and then that is contained, but it's not, because then it's connected to another circle and another circle. And when I made this, I specifically wanted the shadows to show, because those are the stories that are over, right? And the ones that are full of the stories that are happening, right? So the shadows could either be the stories that haven't happened or the stories that are finished. And yeah, so that's what I see when I see that. But I understand that they also look like something that could be in a children's movie as well, with those little legs at the bottom, but that's not what they are. Anyways, so I'm always trying to illustrate that there is a connection between us, and we just have to work on it. And that I often say 1 string is strong, 2 strings is stronger, 3 strings is stronger still. But when we interlace those, that becomes a weaving. And when you try to pull apart a piece of clothing or something that's woven quite tightly, you can't rip it. And that's what a community should be, what a family should be, is this tight knit thing that can withstand all sorts of horrible things. Yes, horrible things happen. Yes, bad things happen, but we can work through it. So this, oh my goodness, now this is the best one I've ever made. This was really difficult to put up, but certainly it is lovely and said what I needed it to say. So these are knitting, quite long knittings. I think the longest one that we had is 20 feet. I don't know what I did. Sorry, guys. And yeah, so to me, again, that same thing, the circles are within there, and then the knitting is on the outside of it, but it's still that, part of it is under stress and part of it's not. So, and that's, again, to me, family and community, where there is stress and there is give and there is push and pull. So specifically at this gallery, because I had this option of using these great windows, which I'm so grateful for. A lot of spaces, it's hard to use the whole space, or they don't let me use the whole space, darn them. And here I was allowed to, I was so honored. And to me, that's what these represented, is these families strung together, being stretched apart, pulled apart, but they're still holding, right? The only time that they're not going to hold is if we cut them, and then they unravel. And that's, I think I always think of that when I'm installing. I think I'm always thinking about it when I'm with my own family. I think I'm always thinking about it when I'm sewing, which I hate doing, by the way. But I'm always thinking about that, is that just one string, if I just pull one string out, I've ruined the whole thing. And that's incredibly important to me. And as a community, if we want to move forward through this, what's happening in Canada right now, with the understanding that residential schools is part of our legacy, or part of our history, the best way to do that is to figure out how to heal from that. And the only way to do that is to start over, right? Start over with new skin, new growth, by going back and saying, tear down whatever it is that's broken, tear down whatever doesn't tell everyone's story, and not just my story, and not just your story, and not just Indigenous voices, but everybody's voice. No one's trying to take away the voice of anyone else, but all of the voices need to be included, because no one wants to walk into a space and not see themselves represented somewhere in that space, which hasn't happened with Indigenous people, and certainly doesn't happen with New Canadians. So there's more stories to be told, and it's the responsibility of everyone to perpetuate that, to move that forward. And I'm just a little tiny little cog in that, just starting the conversation. And what happens after this is up to you, right? It's up to each individual to say, do I want to be the string that pulls out, or do I want to be the string that pulls together? And that's that's what I've been doing.